You sit there, staring at the screen, your hand hovering over the mouse. The trade is right there in front of you. The setup is perfect. Everything you've studied, everything you've prepared for, every rule you've written down says this is the moment. But you can't click. Your finger freezes. Your breath becomes shallow. A wave of something cold and paralyzing washes over you, and suddenly the opportunity is gone. The candle closes. The move happens without you. And you're left sitting there, angry, confused, asking yourself the same question you've asked 1,000 times before. Why can't I just execute? Why does fear control me when I know what I should do? This is not a question of knowledge. This is not a question of strategy. This is a question of neuroscience. And until you understand what's happening inside your brain in those moments, you will remain trapped in the same cycle, watching opportunities pass while fear holds you hostage. The human brain is an extraordinary machine, capable of creativity, logic, innovation, and insight. But it was not designed for trading. It was designed for survival in a world that no longer exists. Every reaction you experience when you sit in front of those charts, every surge of fear when a position moves against you, every rush of excitement when you see green candles climbing, every impulse to chase or freeze or flee, is the result of wiring that evolved over millions of years to keep your ancestors alive in the wilderness. The problem is that the trading screen is not the wilderness. The red candle is not a predator. The missed opportunity is not starvation. But your brain doesn't know that. It treats the market as if your survival depends on it. And in doing so, it hijacks your ability to think clearly, to act rationally, to execute with discipline. This is the hidden truth that separates those who succeed from those who fail. The charts are the same for everyone. The strategies can be learned by anyone. But the brain, the organ that interprets it all, that decides what you do in the moment of truth, that brain is either your greatest weapon or your worst enemy. Inside your skull, a battle is raging every time you trade. On one side is the prefrontal cortex, the rational thinker sitting just behind your forehead. This is the part of you that plans, that analyzes, that writes down rules and commits to discipline. This is the voice that says cut your losses, let your winners run, follow the plan. The prefrontal cortex is calm, logical, capable of seeing the long game. But deep within the brain, buried beneath layers of evolution, sits the amygdala. Small, ancient, and incredibly powerful. The amygdala does not care about your strategy. It does not care about probabilities or risk-reward ratios. Its only job is to detect danger and make you react before it's too late. When a trade goes red, when the position starts bleeding, when you see numbers dropping on the screen, the amygdala interprets that as a threat. It doesn't see data, it sees pain. It doesn't see a temporary drawdown, it sees danger, and so it screams, "Get out now, do something, move." The body floods with cortisol and adrenaline, your heart races, your vision narrows. Your rational brain, the prefrontal cortex that planned everything so carefully, is shoved aside. And in that moment, you are no longer a disciplined trader executing a system. You are a frightened animal reacting to perceived danger. This is why you panic sell at the bottom. This is why you freeze when you should enter. This is why you chase trades you know are bad, desperate to recover what you lost, driven not by logic, but by the primal need to fight back against pain. The amygdala has taken the wheel, and it is driving you straight into disaster. But here is what most traders never realize. This is not a character flaw. This is not weakness. This is biology. You are not broken. You are human. And every human being who has ever tried to trade has faced this same war between the rational mind and the emotional brain. The difference between those who succeed and those who fail is not that the winners have no fear. It's that the winners have learned to train their brain to keep the rational driver in control, even when the emotional passenger is screaming in terror. Neuroscience has shown us something remarkable. The brain is plastic. It can change. It can adapt. It can be rewired. The same circuits that betray you today can be retrained to obey you tomorrow. The same amygdala that fires in panic can be conditioned to recognize that a red candle is not a tiger. The same prefrontal cortex that gets overwhelmed can be strengthened through practice, repetition, and deliberate training until it becomes powerful enough to stay calm under pressure. But this does not happen by accident. It does not happen by reading another book or watching another video. It happens through deliberate, structured rewiring of the brain itself. And that process begins with understanding exactly what is happening inside your head when fear takes over. Think about the last time you were in a losing trade. Not just a small loss, but one that hurt. One that made your stomach turn. You watched the price move against you, and with every tick, you felt something tightening in your chest. You told yourself to stick to the plan, to follow your stop loss, to accept the loss and move on. But you didn't. You held on. You hoped. You prayed. You convinced yourself it would turn around, that you just needed to give it a little more time, that cutting the loss would be admitting defeat. And so you sat there, paralyzed, watching the loss grow bigger and bigger until finally, in desperation, you closed the trade at the worst possible moment. Later, when the storm had passed, you looked back and you knew. You knew exactly what you should have done. You knew your stop was there for a reason. You knew holding on was irrational. But in that moment, knowing didn't matter. Because the amygdala was in control, and the amygdala does not operate on knowledge. It operates on survival instinct. The reason that loss felt so unbearable is rooted in something called loss aversion. Neuroscience has proven that the human brain processes the pain of losing approximately twice as intensely as it processes the pleasure of winning. To your ancestors, losing resources meant potential death. Losing food, losing shelter, losing status in the tribe could mean the difference between survival and extinction. So the brain evolved to react powerfully, violently even, to the experience of loss. It needed to. Hesitation could be fatal. But in trading, this hardwired response becomes poison. You feel the sting of a small loss so acutely that you refuse to take it. You let it run, hoping it will reverse, because the act of locking in that pain feels unbearable. Meanwhile, when you have a winning trade, that same wiring makes you terrified of losing the profit. You see green numbers, and your brain screams, "Take it now, before it disappears." So you grab the small win, relieved to have escaped with something. The result is a trading pattern that guarantees failure. You cut your winners short because you fear losing them. You let your losers grow because you fear accepting the pain. And slowly, methodically, your account bleeds. But it's not just fear that sabotages you. It's also the chemical rush of reward. Every time you enter a trade, every time you see a green candle, every time you imagine the profit you might make, your brain releases dopamine. This neurotransmitter is often called the pleasure chemical, but that's not quite accurate. Dopamine is the chemical of anticipation, of wanting, of craving. It floods your system, not when you get the reward, but when you anticipate it. This is why trading feels so addictive. It's why you find yourself glued to the screen, taking trade after trade, even when you know you should stop. It's not the money you're chasing. It's the chemical high. And the cruel twist is that dopamine spikes higher in conditions of uncertainty. The more unpredictable the reward, the more your brain craves it. Casinos have known this for decades. Slot machines don't pay out on a predictable schedule. They pay out randomly. And that randomness keeps people hooked, pulling the lever again and again, chasing the next hit of dopamine. The market is the same. You never know which trade will be the big winner. And so your brain, flooded with dopamine, pulls you back to the screen, back to the charts, back to the next setup, the next entry, the next chance. You call it ambition. You call it dedication. But your brain calls it addiction. This is why overtrading destroys accounts. You think you're being proactive, staying engaged, seizing opportunities. But in reality, you're chasing dopamine. The brain doesn't care if the setup is valid. It doesn't care if you're following your rules. It just wants the rush. And every time you give in, every time you take a marginal trade just to feel that spike of excitement, you reinforce the neural pathway. The behavior becomes stronger, more automatic, harder to resist. You are literally wiring your brain to overtrade. And the only way to break that cycle is to understand that this is not about discipline in the traditional sense. This is about neurochemistry. You are fighting a chemical process. And you cannot win that fight through willpower alone. Now imagine a different scenario. You've just closed a losing trade. It stings. The money is gone. And immediately, you feel a surge of anger, of frustration, of defiance. You think to yourself, I'm not ending the day like this. I'm getting that back. And before you even realize what you're doing, you're scanning the charts for the next opportunity, not because you see a valid setup, but because you need to fight back. You need to prove that you're not a loser. You need to recover what was taken from you. This is revenge trading. And it is one of the most destructive patterns a trader can fall into. Neuroscience explains why it happens. When you take a loss, the brain experiences it as a threat. The amygdala fires. Cortisol spikes. But instead of triggering fear, it triggers aggression. The fight response. You are no longer thinking about probabilities or edge. You are thinking about war. About winning back what was lost. About refusing to surrender. And so you take the next trade, often with bigger size, often with less confirmation, often in complete violation of your rules. Sometimes you get lucky. The trade works. You feel vindicated. Dopamine floods your system. The brain says, see, fighting back works. And the pathway is reinforced. But more often, the trade fails. And now you've compounded the loss, and the cycle deepens. This is how traders blow up accounts in a single session. Not through one bad trade, but through a cascade of emotional reactions, each one feeding the next, each one driven by biology that has nothing to do with trading and everything to do with survival instinct misfiring in a modern context. The trader who understands this, who sees revenge trading not as a moral failure, but as a neurological hijacking, can begin to build systems to protect themselves. They can create rules that force a pause after a loss. They can limit the number of trades per day. They can automate their stops so there's no decision to make in the heat of the moment. They can journal their emotional state before every trade, building awareness of when the amygdala is taking over. These are not just good habits. They are neural interventions. They are tools designed to keep the rational brain in control when the emotional brain is screaming for blood. But awareness alone is not enough. You can understand the neuroscience. You can know that fear is just the amygdala firing, that greed is just dopamine spiking, that revenge trading is just cortisol-fueled aggression. But knowing does not change the wiring. Knowledge is intellectual. Rewiring is experiential. And this is where most traders get stuck. They read about psychology. They understand the concepts. They nod along and think, yes, that's me. But then they sit down to trade and nothing changes. The same fear arises. The same impulses take over. The same mistakes repeat, because the brain does not change through understanding. The brain changes through practice, through repetition, through the deliberate, consistent reinforcement of new patterns until the old pathways weaken and the new ones become dominant. Think of it like this. Every time you take an action, neurons fire in a specific sequence. If you repeat that action often enough, those neurons begin to wire together. There's a saying in neuroscience, neurons that fire together, wire together. This is the foundation of habit formation. Every time you panic sell, you strengthen the neural pathway for panic selling. Every time you chase a trade out of FOMO, you strengthen the pathway for chasing. Every time you revenge trade after a loss, you deepen that groove. But the reverse is also true. Every time you follow your rules, you strengthen the pathway for discipline. Every time you sit with discomfort, instead of acting impulsively, you build the circuit for patience. Every time you accept a loss calmly and move on, you rewire your response to pain. The brain is constantly adapting, constantly reshaping itself based on what you do most often. And this is the most liberating truth in all of trading psychology. You are not stuck with the brain you have. You can build the brain you need. The process is called neuroplasticity, and it is the reason why change is possible. The same brain that sabotages you today can become the brain that serves you tomorrow. But it requires deliberate training. It requires repetition. It requires exposing yourself to the situations that trigger fear, greed, and impulsivity, and responding differently than you have in the past. Over time, the new response becomes automatic. What once required enormous effort becomes effortless. What once felt unnatural becomes natural. This is how elite athletes train. They don't just practice skills. They practice emotional regulation under pressure. They simulate game conditions until their nervous system adapts, until the body knows how to stay calm when the stakes are high. Traders must do the same. You must simulate the stress of trading. You must practice the pause before the click. You must rehearse the calm acceptance of loss. And you must do it again and again until the brain rewires itself. One of the most powerful tools for rewiring the brain is journaling. Not just tracking trades, but tracking emotions. Before you enter a trade, write down how you feel. Are you calm and confident, or are you anxious and desperate? Are you following your plan, or are you chasing something? After the trade, regardless of the outcome, write down what you felt, what you thought, what you did. Over time, patterns will emerge. You will begin to see the triggers. You will notice that fear spikes when you trade too large. You will see that you chase most often after a winning streak when dopamine is high. You will recognize that revenge trading always follows a specific emotional state. And once you see the pattern, you can interrupt it. You can create a rule. You can build a system. You can rewire the response. This is not therapy. This is neural engineering. You are studying your own brain, identifying the faulty circuits, and installing new ones. Another powerful tool is visualization. Neuroscience has shown that the brain does not distinguish strongly between real experience and vividly imagined experience. When you visualize yourself executing a trade calmly, following your rules, accepting a loss without emotion, your brain fires many of the same neurons as if you were actually doing it. This is why athletes spend hours visualizing performance. It's not positive thinking. It's neural rehearsal. You are laying down the pathways before the real event happens. So before the market opens, sit quietly. Close your eyes. Visualize yourself in the trades you expect to take. See yourself entering calmly. See the position moving against you. Feel the discomfort. And then see yourself following your stop, closing the trade, and moving on without emotion. Rehearse it. Experience it mentally. And when the real moment comes, your brain will have a template to follow. The pathway has already been activated. The response is no longer foreign. It is familiar. And familiarity reduces the power of fear. Meditation is another scientifically validated method for strengthening the prefrontal cortex and calming the amygdala. When you meditate, you practice observing your thoughts without reacting to them. You notice the urge to move, to fidget, to escape discomfort, and you choose to stay. This is the exact skill you need in trading. The ability to feel fear and not act on it. The ability to feel greed and not chase. The ability to sit with uncertainty and remain calm. Studies show that even just 10 minutes of daily meditation increases gray matter density in the prefrontal cortex and reduces activity in the amygdala. In other words, it strengthens your rational control and weakens your emotional reactivity. This is not spiritual practice. This is brain training, and the traders who meditate consistently report greater emotional stability, better focus, and fewer impulsive mistakes. Physical exercise also plays a critical role. Aerobic exercise increases blood flow to the brain, delivering oxygen and nutrients that enhance cognitive function. But more importantly, exercise triggers the release of brain-derived neurotrophic factor, a protein that promotes the growth of new neurons and strengthens synaptic connections. When you exercise regularly, you are literally growing a stronger, more adaptable brain. You are enhancing neuroplasticity. You are making it easier for your brain to learn new patterns and break old ones. The trader who neglects their body is sabotaging their mind. The trader who prioritizes movement, who gets their heart rate up, who sweats and breathes hard, is investing in their most valuable trading tool. Not their computer, not their software, their brain. Sleep is perhaps the most underestimated factor in trading performance. When you sleep, the brain consolidates memories, clears metabolic waste, and restores emotional regulation. Without adequate sleep, the prefrontal cortex weakens, and the amygdala becomes hyperreactive. You become more impulsive, more emotional, more prone to mistakes. Studies show that even mild sleep deprivation impairs decision-making as much as alcohol intoxication. If you are trading on 5 hours of sleep, you are trading drunk. Your ability to assess risk, to control impulses, to think clearly is compromised. And yet traders wear sleep deprivation like a badge of honor, staying up to watch overnight markets, grinding through exhaustion. This is not dedication. This is self-sabotage. The professional trader understands that rest is not weakness. Rest is the foundation of performance. The brain cannot rewire itself, cannot learn, cannot adapt without sleep. If you want to trade fearlessly, you must sleep deeply. Now let's talk about fear itself. Not as an emotion to eliminate, but as a signal to understand. Fear is not your enemy. Fear is information. When you feel fear before a trade, your brain is telling you something. Sometimes it's telling you the trade is too risky. Sometimes it's telling you the position size is too large. Sometimes it's telling you that you haven't done enough preparation. And sometimes it's telling you nothing useful at all. It's just the amygdala misfiring, treating a normal trade like a life-threatening event. The key is to distinguish between rational fear and irrational fear. Rational fear protects you. It keeps you from risking too much, from trading setups you don't understand, from entering when conditions are poor. Irrational fear paralyzes you. It keeps you from executing valid setups, from taking the trades your system identifies, from doing what you know is right. And the only way to tell the difference is through experience, through journaling, through tracking which fears were justified and which were not. Over time, you build a database of your own psychology. You learn to recognize when fear is wisdom and when fear is just noise. The same is true for greed. Greed is not inherently bad. Greed is the desire for more, for growth, for success. But when greed is driven by dopamine and desperation rather than strategy and discipline, it becomes destructive. The trader who chases every move, who increases size recklessly after a win, who abandons their plan because they smell easy money, is not being ambitious. They are being hijacked by neurochemistry. The solution is not to suppress greed but to channel it. To redirect that energy into disciplined execution. To rewire the reward system so that satisfaction comes not from breaking rules and getting lucky, but from following the process regardless of outcome. This is the shift from external validation to internal validation. From outcome-based dopamine to process-based dopamine. And it is one of the most powerful transformations a trader can make. Let's talk about the concept of flow. There is a state that elite performers in every field describe, where action becomes effortless, where time seems to slow down, where doubt disappears and you are simply present, executing, performing at your peak. Neuroscientists call this flow state. In flow, the prefrontal cortex quiets down, reducing self-consciousness and overthinking. The brain's reward system activates, releasing a cascade of neurochemicals that enhance focus, pattern recognition, and decision-making. Traders in flow don't fight the market. They move with it. They don't second-guess every decision. They trust their preparation. They don't feel fear or greed as overwhelming forces. They feel them as background noise, acknowledged but not controlling. Flow is not mystical. It is a neurological state that can be cultivated. But it requires specific conditions. You must be challenged but not overwhelmed. The task must stretch your skill but not break it. You must have clear goals and immediate feedback. You must eliminate distractions. And you must have done the preparation, the training, the repetition, so that when the moment comes, your brain can execute without hesitation. This is why routines are so critical. Before the market opens, you need a ritual that signals to your brain it is time to perform. Maybe you review your plan. Maybe you meditate. Maybe you visualize. Maybe you simply sit in silence and breathe. The specifics don't matter. What matters is consistency. The brain loves patterns. When you repeat the same sequence of actions before trading, you create a neural trigger. The routine itself becomes a cue that shifts your brain into the right state. Professional traders are fanatical about their routines, not because they are superstitious, but because they understand neuroscience. They are priming their brain for optimal performance. They are giving the prefrontal cortex time to wake up fully, to take control, to override the emotional impulses that will inevitably arise. Without a routine, you are trading cold. The brain is unprepared. The amygdala is on high alert. and the likelihood of emotional hijacking skyrockets. Here is the truth that most traders never accept. You will never eliminate fear. You will never eliminate greed. You will never eliminate the urge to chase or the impulse to panic. These are built into your biology. They are part of being human. But you can learn to act despite them. You can train your brain to recognize the feeling, acknowledge it, and then execute your plan anyway. This is not fearlessness. This is courage. Fearlessness is the absence of fear. Courage is action in the presence of fear. And courage is a skill. It is a neural pathway that strengthens with use. Every time you feel fear and trade anyway, you wire in courage. Every time you feel the urge to chase and you pause instead, you wire in discipline. Every time you take a loss and move on calmly, you wire in resilience. Over time, these pathways become so strong that the old patterns of panic and impulsivity begin to fade. Not because you've become a different person, but because you've built a different brain. The transformation is not instant. Neuroplasticity takes time. The research suggests it takes anywhere from 60 to 90 days of consistent practice to form a new habit, to lay down a new neural pathway strong enough to become automatic. This means you must commit. You must show up every day. You must follow your routine, journal your trades, visualize your execution, meditate, exercise, sleep. You must do the work not for a week, not for a month, but for months. And in the beginning, it will feel forced. It will feel unnatural. The old patterns will pull at you. The old impulses will scream. But if you persist, if you refuse to give in, if you keep laying down the new tracks, one day you will wake up and realize something has shifted. The fear is still there, but it's quieter. The greed is still there, but it doesn't control you. The market moves against you, and you don't panic. You just follow your stop. The market rips higher without you, and you don't chase. You just wait for your setup. You are no longer fighting yourself. You are simply executing. This is what it feels like when the brain has been rewired. And here is the final truth. The market will never change. It will always be volatile. It will always be uncertain. It will always trigger your fear and your greed. But you can change. You can build a brain that interprets volatility as opportunity instead of threat. You can train a nervous system that stays calm under pressure. You can rewire the circuits that once sabotaged you into circuits that serve you. The greatest edge in trading is not a secret strategy. It is not a magic indicator. It is not insider information. The greatest edge is a disciplined mind, a brain that has been trained through repetition and practice to act with courage, patience, and clarity even when every instinct screams to do otherwise. That is the neuroscience of trading. That is how you rewire your brain for fearless decisions. Not by eliminating fear, but by mastering it. Not by becoming someone else, but by becoming the best version of yourself. The version that executes the plan. The version that follows the rules. The version that trusts the process. That version already exists inside you. It is simply waiting for you to build the neural pathways that set it free.